Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of PodSafe Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and I'm your moderator. I'm also the creator, publisher, chief everything officer over at thechocolateLife.com. Welcome to today's episode, and let's just jump right into it. Today's topic is going to be judging chocolate awards. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about the 2024 Craft Chocolate Challenge, for which I am head judge. But I wanted to give everyone who's listening today an idea of just how I approach judging chocolate awards, and not just the Craft Chocolate Challenge, but also with my experience at the International Chocolate Awards, at the Good Food Awards, at the Prêmio Bean-to-Bar Brasil, and other programs that I've been a part of. And because I think it's important. I mean, if you're a fan of chocolate, as I am, and you may not actually know in depth and in detail how the awards programs get judged. And it's important to understand that every single awards program, let's just jump back here for a little while. Every single awards program has its own approach. And generally those approaches evolve over time, which is a good thing, right? But going in as a judge, it is important to be able to understand how the judging process is going to occur. Now, when we started off, for example, at the International Chocolate Awards, and I remember judging for the first time in a New York round, or a North America's round in New York City, well over a decade ago, we filled out sheets of paper. There was basically the equivalent of a spreadsheet, and we marked up the entries on this particular spreadsheet or in a table on a piece of paper. And then somebody went through and they hand curated all of the results. So they went through, compiled is probably a better word, and they compiled all of the results. Since then, the International Chocolate Awards has gone on to a voting system that takes place online. So judges are asked, pretty much required, to bring with them a computer, and that judging is done online. Now, the Craft Chocolate Awards, which I'm going to be working on this year, and for which I'm the head judge for the second year in a row, is quite a bit different than all of the other awards. And so I want to focus on that first, give you sort of some context for what it is that the Craft Chocolate Challenge does, how it's different from other awards, and then to move forward. So as for every single episode of PodSafe Chocolate, there is a post on thechocolateLife.com. Here's the current page. The current post is usually pinned into the top rail here. If not, you'll notice that it's in this list here. So the three most recent, including the current one, is up here. And if you want to, there is a link to all the episodes of PodSave Chocolate that you want to get to there. So just a quick way about the way the website, the way the Chocolate Life works. So here on the post, one of the things that I want to do is I want to provide links and resources and background so that you can pay attention to what it is that I'm saying, so you don't really have to go and go, oh, what was that URL? And you can follow along. Plus, if there are any resources which are mentioned during the episode that are not linked to on this page, I can add them afterwards. So if you're watching, no matter whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, a couple of things. Number one, go and just let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And I'll get that up on screen. And then, of course, if you have a question or comment, I can get that up on screen as well. And I will respond to it and answer the question if you have one. And so I'm reminded of that this morning by Mike King at Encore Coffee Company in Kansas City, Missouri. Mike, good morning. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you here today. And to let people know that Mike, Encore Coffee, was an entrant in the 2023 Craft Chocolate Challenge and won an award. And Mike is also an entrant in the 2024 Craft Chocolate Challenge. And one of the things that the organizers of the Craft Chocolate Challenge do, so Dustin Cornett, who's been a guest here on the show, or here on the Chocolate Life, whether it's the Chocolate Life Live or PodSafe Chocolate, right? One of the things that the organizers of the Craft Chocolate Challenge do, which is different from pretty much every other awards, is they list all of the entrants. Now, so if you go to the Craft Chocolate Challenge, there's a link to season 3, which is the 2024 Craft Chocolate Challenge. Boom. And registration is closed. So one of the things you'll find on this page is you'll find the official entries. And the official entries are any entrant which has said, hey, they filled out a form and said, hey, I want to enter. And then what they do is they deliver the bars to the organizer on time. So that's what it takes to be an official entry. You're an unofficial entry if you let the organizer know that you want to be a part of it. You're an official entry when your bars are arrived. And I don't know of any other awards program that lists all of the entrants. I know it in the past at the International Chocolate Awards there's a vetting stage which happens. So all of the entrants go through a process, and then a list of finalists is presented, has in the past, and it is the finalists that go and are judged. And so, all right, so you don't actually know all of the entrants. And if I mention a name, I'm not speaking out of class. I'm not speaking out of everybody is mentioned here. And I think, I am of two minds about this. From a transparency perspective, exactly who is entering the competition. And so for me, as a judge, of course I know, but what it does for people who are not judging, who are looking at the words, number one is they can say, so for example, in the white chocolate area, we're going to award 3 awards, a gold, a silver, and a bronze. And what you're going to know is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 entries. And so in the white chocolate competition, 30% of the entrants are going to be given an award. So this is really, really simple math. If you go to the dark chocolate competition, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are more than 20, 25 entries. So you can get an idea about what ratio of awards is given to entrants, right? And the Craft Chocolate Challenge is different from most other competitions. At the International Chocolate Awards, what they do is they establish a threshold for the score that an entrant must have in order to be given an award. So if you get above 90, that may be the number. I'm just speaking off the top of my head. If you get above a 90, you get a gold. If you get between an 80 and a 90, you get a silver. If you get between a 70, some sort of rubric like that is used, right? Here at the Craft Chocolate Challenge, there are only going to be 3 in every single category. And you have an idea about which ones, who the entries are. You don't have an idea, you know exactly who the official entries are. And every single one of these entries is, right now you can go and visit their website, which is very, very cool. So if you are interested, even if you're not a judge, what you can do is you can say, ooh, here are the entries, and I can go learn more about them, right? So that's really, really cool for me. And for you, so you can follow along and you can understand what it is what's going on. So for me as a judge, one of the great things about having this list is that I'm going to go through the judging process, and I am going to. It's not always obvious which category an entry fits in. Right. And so having this canonical list, here are the entrants and here are the categories, is really, really, really helpful for me to have. And for you, I mean, there are a lot of brands you may never heard of before. I've never heard of Aki for here, for example, although I know of Mashpee. I met them at the Chocoa in Amsterdam a bunch of years ago. They're from Ecuador. So there are lots. You, right, as people who are following the awards, have a lot of information that you don't often get, right? And I think that that's really, really helpful and really, really important to you. Now, another thing that's about this award that people may or may not know is that there is no entry fee. So all you have to do is get your chocolate to the organizer, and that's the cost to you to participate. And the other thing about it is that there are no entrant can provide more than 2 chocolate bars, so no more than 2 entrants, and you can't enter a bar, more than 1 bar in any category. So one of the challenges with the International Chocolate Awards, and this is borne out by my own statistical analysis of previous awards, is that if I can enter 10 or 12 or 20 bars, it is expensive, right? But if I enter a lot of bars, and the magic number is I need to enter 4 or more, right? I'm pretty much guaranteed that I'm going to win something in some category, right? Here, the goal is to focus on diversity, right? And we, for example, if I entered 5 bars into the white chocolate category and there were only 14 entries, statistically, the likelihood that I was going to win something is going to improve. And so that's not something that is done here. It's also very interesting is that if we go look at the entries in the dark chocolate category, you'll notice that this is, we're not limited to, there's not a plain and flavored version. So there's not a plain dark chocolate and a flavored dark chocolate. It's all of the dark chocolates are in the same category. They're not judged separately, and that anything which has any kind of inclusion, any kind of texture in the bar is thrown into this inclusion category, whether or not there's any additional flavoring or not. So for me as a judge, this is useful and very, very helpful in the sense that if, for example, if it was white chocolate with inclusions, white chocolate without inclusions, then the number of entries per category might not rise above 4 or 5. And so from a judging perspective, it becomes more challenging. And then, are there enough entries in a particular category in order to make the judging interesting or not, right? So for you, right, at the other end. So this is a very, very interesting balance of the way we approach things, or the way the organizers approach things. And this is something that Dustin has been very, very careful at from the beginning. Now, if we were to go look at the Northwest Chocolate Festival Awards or the Chocolate Alliance Awards, or if you were to go look at the Academy of Chocolate Awards, there is no limit to the number of awards that are given in any specific category, right? And they're going to encourage as many entries as possible because they are, in fact, for-profit enterprises, and that's not necessarily the case here. Justin is a chocolate maker himself. He created a competition that was interesting for him as a chocolate maker, and focused on what he saw other awards competition were not doing, which is providing feedback. And so he was very, very careful to create a competition which was focused on giving feedback. All right. And that decision has led to a lot of the things, a lot of the decisions that were made. So those decisions led to a lot of decisions, which is, that's a tautology. His desire to do these things was very, very much in line with what it is that he wanted to do. I think is also really important to notice here there are entries from just in the white chocolate category, Japan, India, the United States, of course, Honduras, and Denmark. I mean, so the international representation here, Norway, Ecuador, New Zealand for the first time, France, the Dominican Republic, Denmark again, India, so Venezuela. So the international representation here for me is going to be a lot of fun. All right, so before I jump into the next thing, what I'd like to do is give a quick shout out to Jeffrey Gardner, chef, Marsata Chocolate in the Los Angeles area. Torrance, I believe I remember where the factory is. Good morning, listeners of the finest chocolate show on earth. You flatter me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And chef, I have some of your chocolate. And so I know that you've been going through some health issues, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to schedule that episode of Pod Safe Chocolate so that we can have an online virtual tasting of the bars that I brought back with me from my trip to LA. They're here, they're in good condition, and I'm really looking forward to scheduling it. So, message me offline and we will schedule a date. Hey, hopefully this month, if things work out very, very well, work out for you. Anyway, again, and having heard a little bit about what's going on in your life, I hope that everything is moving in the right direction. So that'd be great. So, having said all that, what I want to point out is that, let me do something. I'm going to go step off, right? And right. I received, I should have said this, I received a big box of chocolate. Now I've reorganized this box. It was shipped in a very, very different format, and it was nicely wrapped up and all that kind of stuff. But I received a box of more than 65 entries, right, of chocolate. And the first thing that I do as a virtual judge, I don't need to do this in person, but the first thing when judging virtually is that I go through and I make sure that I have all of the chocolate that I am supposed to have, right? And so one way for me to do that would have gone through the official entry list, right? I could have seen, do I have a bar that matches this entry? I want to go make sure I do that. But in this particular case, the Craft Chocolate Challenge is organized, what I was able to do was to go through and take a look at the judging forms. So for every single bar of chocolate that I received that I'm going to judge, there is an individual judging form. And the reason why this is done, number one, is that the focus, right, my responsibility as a judge is in the feedback, right? So the judging forms focus on providing the feedback. And so I have a directory sitting on my computer, and I was able to go through and look in alphabetical order, right, through each of the judging forms that I have and say, I have this bar of chocolate, I have this bar of chocolate. And I was able to reach out to Dustin when I said, there's a bar of chocolate here for which there's no separate judging form, right? What does that mean, right? And it turns out that there is one of the entries they did the way the product is packaged for retail sale, because packaging is something that we take a look at as judges. But the regulations require that they submit a bar for judging. And so there is the retail package and there is a bar. So, first thing I do is I want to make sure that I have everything, right? I want to just very, very quickly let everybody know that they can go to this post on the Chocolate Life, or the Chocolate Life, the PodSafe Chocolate, and what they can do is, here is the blank judging form that I'm showing you. You can download the blank judging form, and you can see exactly what it is that we as judges are going to be seeing. So we get each form, and the name of the maker is on the form, right? We also get this bar information is the name of the bar that's on the front of the package, right? So it'll give us percentage perhaps, and some indication of what that bar is. And this is something that Dustin does as the organizer. He creates one of these forms for every single bar in the competition. Now, I, right, as a judge, am required to put my judge number. And so what this does is it semi-anonymizes. So this form in its entirety is going to be sent. So every single judge's form is going to be sent in its entirety to every single entrant. So every single entrant is going to see every single word that every single judge writes about their bar. And that is unusual, all right? They're going to see all the ratings and all the rankings, not just excerpts of the feedback, right? This makes judging this competition very, very different from judging every other competition, where there is a feedback component, but it's not the focus of what it is that's going on, right? So there is separately, we are provided, let me see, there is a list of ingredients which is provided, right? So sometimes the packaging is in a foreign language. We have a number of Japanese entries this year in which most of the label is in Japanese, not in English. And so while I could use my phone and a translation app in order to get it, Dustin is doing the translation for us. So we are getting the ingredients that are listed by the maker, the retail price, right? So and that is in right. If it's in India, it might be in rupees, right? For which I can convert, right? But also we have the weight of the bar. So there is the possibility to go and do some calculation there and say, how expensive is it? So for the actual judging, right? So when it comes to awarding gold, silver, or bronze, or yeah, gold, silver, or bronze in each category, what we're doing is we're providing an overall tasting score. And the overall tasting score is on a scale of 1 to 5. I'll go over what that means, right? But the overall tasting score of 1 to 5. So for the chocolate mold score, at a scale of 1 to 5, we're saying how attractive is the mold. Then the same thing is true on the packaging, right? So these are things that we fill out as judges. Now, there may also be some notes from the maker. So for example, this might be a new bar, it might be an experimental bar. There are all sorts of notes from the maker, right, that get thrown into this category that Dustin shares with us when he thinks that they are appropriate. And so we get those. So this is what I'm looking at for every single bar of chocolate. And so this is a PDF version of what it turns out to be either a Pages or a docx format, right? Is I am asked to give my feedback on the tasting notes, right? And this is an endlessly scrolling document, right? So it's not a spreadsheet where I might feel constrained by the borders of the cell that I'm in terms of limiting the feedback, which happens when you're using an online form, right? That I can write as much as I want here, right? And I think importantly, what I can do is I can start. I have enough room, and as a judge, I'm allowed to, or I'm encouraged to say, well, compared with maybe other bars in this competition, or compared with other bars that I have tasted or other makers that I've tasted, I can give you feedback about this. I'm just not narrowly constrained by a specific methodology of tasting. So one of the challenges I think I have with some aspects of the International Chocolate Awards judging is that people are encouraged to use, and they may now be required to use, the judging format of the International Institute of Cocoa and Chocolate Tasting. And so here, we are, as judges, we are given a great deal of latitude in terms of what the feedback that we want to give, right? Which I think is really, really important. And the same thing is true. It's not just tasting notes and feedback, but we can give specific feedback about the chocolate bar mold appearance. So this easiness to eat, which you see out here, is interesting because sometimes we get a mold which is beautiful, but it doesn't break apart easily, or it might be very, very thick. And so the thickness of the bar is going to affect the bite, the chew, and the melt, right? So we get an opportunity to not just say 3 out of 5, right? But we get to say, okay, we like the mold. The tempering was perfect. We didn't see any, examples of mold release marks. We looked at the back. There are no pinholes from. You get the idea. This is, we get to provide this, right? So and this is a really interesting aspect for me. Would you buy this bar? Or recommend this bar for friends and family? And I think that you know, I could let's say that what I do is I judge this bar a 3 out of 5, right? And I'll explain to you what 3 out of 5 means in just a second. But would I bar this bar for friends or family? So knowing my audience, right? Saying, well, I have some friends that I know like this kind of chocolate for this kind of reasons. And so we are encouraged to do more than just a simple yes or no, right? And that is really cool, right? And then we have a rating. We do have a rating on the packaging, but then we have a place where we're encouraged to provide feedback about the packaging. We're going to do that. And then anything else that occurs to us during the course of tasting the bar, we get a chance to record that feedback here, which is also really, really interesting. But as you might imagine, right, because the focus is not just on first impression or immediate impression, right, it is considered feedback. It takes a long time to fill these forms out, right? And I know that there are going to be people who are going to be judging this competition in person in Rushville, Indiana this year with Dustin, right? but I'm doing this virtually, and I am really, really happy that I am doing this virtually, right? Because I have more than 65 bars to review this way, right? And what I can do is I can take my time, right? And I can revisit a bar if I want to. I get halfway through the judging and something occurs to me as a result of tasting something, I can come back and revisit. When and part of that, which I think is really, really important for me, is that I get to decide, number one, the number of bars per day that I want to evaluate, right? And I get to decide the order in which, right? And I have complete control over the order in which I put these things together. So, for example, if I'm doing an in-person chocolate tasting, right, what might happen is I'm given a plate of samples, right? And so maybe there's a flight of 9 samples or 7, which is not uncommon. I have the opportunity to choose the order in which I taste those samples, right? But I do not have any greater latitude than that. I must get through all of the samples that are in the flight in front of me. And normally there's a time constraint. So, as a judge at the International Chocolate Awards, I might be going through 30 to 60 chocolates in a day. They're very, very small. Um, you the sample size is relatively small. Maybe it's 2 bites. Often it's not even that much. And so the kind of attention that I can give and the amount of time that I have to form an impression. So this is a gestalt impression that I'm going to give to be able to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's this in terms of taste, it's this in terms of texture, it's this in terms of aroma. Notice that I can give an overall tasting score, right? But I can go through and give extensive feedback on what it is that I'm smelling and tasting, right? Really, really very, very, very different approach to what it is that's going on. And most importantly, what I get to do is I get to say, in any given day, this is how many bars I'm going to be evaluating. And on any given day, what is the selection of bars that I'm going to be tasting? If I'm sitting down, and this has been the case where, at an awards program, somebody will put in front of me a flight of 7 different chocolates, right? And they'll all be roughly 70% two ingredient from the same origin. I'm tasting a bunch of, well, when I was a judge at the International Chocolate Awards in Peru, that would be the case. All of those chocolates would be beans from Peru. There'd be a bunch of single origins, and a lot of them would be two ingredients, 70%. And so I'm literally tasting a plate of chocolates which are functionally very, very similar. Yeah, some might be beans from Chincho, some might be beans from Piura, some might be beans from San Martin province, but they're essentially very, very similar chocolates. And that makes it really, really hard. By the time you get to the 7th or 8th sample in a flight, it becomes really difficult, right? To be able to, for the discipline, to be able to really understand and differentiate what it is that you're doing. And so one of the things that I really appreciate here at for this awards, the Craft Chocolate Challenge, is I have the ability to pick um, how many bars per day I'm going to evaluate, and then which bars per day. And so what I'm going to go do, right, if we go back to this, is I'm going to go through, let's go take a look, and I am going to say, well, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go alphabetically because I have an alphabetical list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, it's going to take me 7 days. So if 7 days, I need to do 9 bars a day on average. So roughly 63 of the 67, I think the total bars that there are. So I can do 9 bars a day. And so I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to do 2 inclusions and 2 white chocolates and 2 milk chocolates and 3 dark chocolates a day, right? And then I get to choose the order in which I am going to eat these things, right? I can tell you it is so wonderful, right, to be able to have that freedom as a judge, right, to be able to do this. Now, and that is a result of judging virtually. Um, I haven't judged virtually an International Chocolate Awards or an Academy of Chocolate Awards. So I don't know if the organizers say, you should do all the dark chocolates you have in one day and all the milk chocolates you have on another day. I don't know if there is any particular instructions that are given by the organizers when it comes to how you're supposed to taste these bars. But I know that within this competition, the Craft Chocolate Challenge, it is just a great goodness given what I have. And by the way, I have a whole bar. I don't just have a 5-gram sample broken up from a bar. I have a whole bar that I get to taste, right? And I can go back to it and I can really have a sensibility. So I literally sometimes, can spend 20 minutes on a bar. I mean, I have spent that long on bars that intrigue me in this competition, where I would be lucky to have 3 or 4 in many other competitions. It's really, 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 really fabulous. What I do miss as a virtual judge, as opposed to an in-person judge, at least in some respects, is that everything that I'm doing is in my own head and in my own mouth. I don't have a chance to interact with anybody else over the course of the day. And that makes discipline a little challenging. If you're in a room with a bunch of other people and we're all doing the same thing, there's a sense in which you have deadlines and you need to get stuff done. Now, I know at the Good Food Awards, when I was a judge in the confectionery competition, while I was on the committees that developed the initial set of criteria for what good meant for both confectionery and chocolate, I've only ever judged the confectionery category. Um, I encouraged conversation among the people who were sitting at my table, because because of the way I set up the judging at my table, there was this back and forth between people. And I know that at other competitions, if you're in a room, everybody needs to be silent, and it's difficult enough if there's no interaction and there's nothing which makes the day shorter, right, and doesn't inject any fun into the judging process. It's a challenge. All right. So while I appreciate the ability to control what I judge, how I judge it, when I judge it in this competition, being a virtual judge can be a challenge, in the sense that you need to have the discipline to go in and do this, right? So I'm going to do 4 bars in the morning and 5 bars in the afternoon. You need to set the schedule and you need to go and do it, and that can be a real challenge. Before I continue, what I want to do is I want to do a quick shout out to Mark and Yuri at Blue Spruce Chocolates in Kittredge, Colorado. Good morning to you both. I want to let you know, to everybody who's watching, that Blue Spruce was awarded last year in the 2023 competition and has 2 entries in this year's competition. And one of the things we do is, you can't enter the same chocolate. If you won something last year, you can't enter the same bar this year, right? You have to do something different. So it's really, really fun. So, Mark, I'm really looking forward to tasting the things that you entered this year. There's different. And then, hey guys, Mike, thanks for doing a shout out to Mark. It's really good to have you both here. So having said that, let's go then to the judging guidelines. And again, looking away, is that you've got a copy of the judging guidelines. If you want to go take a look at the judging guidelines, you can download them, right? And you can go take a look at what we're doing, right? And how we're doing it. And these are guidelines that have evolved over the course of the last maybe 18, 24 months. When Dustin approached me about being a judge and being the head judge, we talked about developing a judging rubric, and this is the rubric that we came up with. And you can get it, right? So you can download this, and this is what every judge gets, right, when they do it. And if you go take a look at the judging form, right, then many of the instructions will make more sense, right? Right. So there's a quick overview. Yeah, every bar gets its own form, right? We all need to add our judge's number to the form. Entrance, right? So So when it says that entrants will not know your number, they will not know which judge has which number. So the judge number I was last year is not the same judge number I am this year. So it's going to be more challenging for people to figure out which are mine, unless I personally decide to out myself. Right? I am, fully given agency to be able to say, hey, this is Clay, and I'm, excuse me, and I want to share who I am with you now. And also, let's go really, really quickly. One of the things that is done is that on this page, not this year. So let's go to season 2, where we have the winners. So once the winners are announced, the judging panel will be announced. And so we have Judge 1. So this is a chocolate maker who prefers Italian cuisine, prefers milk chocolate, and likes to drink red wine, vodka with Red Bull. I'm not a big fan. You have a pastry chef whose preferred cuisine is Japanese, who likes to drink tea. Right. So, you get an idea of what the background is of every single one of the judges, including a notation if anybody has become a certified chocolate taster. And so we provide chefs, pastry chefs, professional reviewers, just chocolate fans, journalists, all over the map. Right. And once the judging is complete and the awards are announced, you'll get an idea about how many, right, of what type of judge there is, right? And so the entrants know us by a number, and you know what? After the fact, we're outed. So is that true? Yep, this is me, right? So I was judge number 9 last year, right? And you get an idea. So you know who I am. So after the fact, all of the entrants know who the judges are, but not until then. So that's really, really cool as well. But going back, so when we're scoring taste, right, we're given this general rubric, right? So, and saying to everybody, the contest scoring will only take into account the rating of the taste rating of the chocolate, right? The feedback, right, will not be a part of the scoring, right? Any of the feedback that's been given is not part of the scoring. This is where people go. And so, so these are the general things. What you're doing is you're talking about the texture, but people are not asked to rate texture on a scale of 1 to 4 or a scale of 1 to 10, right? Just to consider texture. So what is the smell? Again, there's no separate rating for aroma, right? As opposed to texture or taste, right? All right. Sweetness, flavor, temper, aftertaste, all of these things we want the judges to take into consideration, right? And as a matter of fact, it's how I taste, right? And it's how I review things, right? This is very, very heavily influenced by the way I approach the judging process. And there's there are a couple of things which feed into this, and it's one of the reasons why I like to judge this way. And if I'm in a situation where I have an opportunity to talk with people about judging, I want to go and have people judge this way. It's because number one is that the difference between 87 and 89 is 2 points, right? But the difference between 91 and 93 is 2 points. However, anything which begins with a 9 just psychologically has much more value than anything begins with an 8, right? And it turns out that a lot of people, what actually is the difference between an 87 and an 89 in concrete terms, right? So I don't know anybody whose taste is good enough, and I don't know anybody whose taste is good enough to be able to differentiate to 1 part in 100 when it comes to taste. I don't know anybody who can do it. And I don't like scoring systems which, right, require you to differentiate in anything less than whole numbers, right? And then you need a calculator, because what you have to do is you have to say that taste is worth 40% of the score and aroma is worth 10% of the score. And so you're weighting things and you get some number. And at the end, what does 87 mean, right? What does 8.7 out of 10 mean, right? In real terms. So the focus of this competition, right, from a judging perspective, right, is emotional. How do you feel about the chocolate, right? And so very, very specifically, if the tasting scoring range, right, if you give a 1, it's not only would I never buy it, but if somebody gifted to me, I wouldn't eat it, and I wouldn't re-gift it to anybody whose opinion mattered to me, right? So you now know how, as a judge, I feel about this chocolate, right? And it's this summation of all of these different elements, right? And so it could have a fabulous flavor, right? But not be in the best temper, right? It could have a fabulous taste on the beginning, but have a lousy taste at the end, right? So some aftertaste, maybe it's from a sugar, an alternative sweetener, or something like that. I mean, so we get to talk about what we feel about the chocolate, right? Rather than emotionally in our head. On a scale of 1 to 9, or 1 to 10, this is a 7, right? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 9, right? Without any feedback to say, why did we give it that score? Why did we give it a 7, not an 8? Right? Or why did we give a 7, not a 6? Right? And that's part of the focus here. So number 2, I wouldn't buy it if I had, I wouldn't buy it and have no interest in eating any more of it. Number 3 is, if ordinary was a chocolate, this would be it. And I use the word ordinary rather than average in a very, very specific way, because something that is ordinary, it carries with it an emotional weight, which is very, very different than if something is average, right? So number 4 is, I'm intrigued and will definitely come back for more, but I will also give a friend a bite, right? So I'm willing to share what it is I've got. Number 5 is among the best I've ever tasted, and I'm not sharing with anyone. All mine, right? And then we encourage people to go, the judges, to go through on the scale of 1 to 5. And when you're scoring the packaging and when you're scoring the molds, you give it, a similar kind of scale on 1 to 5. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm going, in the future, another way to think about this would be to put it right into a tier list, right? And so rather than using 1 to 5, you might be using 5. You'd use an S for superior, and then A, B, C, D, F for fail, right? So another way to think about this, it's adding another level, 6 levels rather than 5. But you could actually, as a judge, I could come through and I could go, oh, I'm going to create a tier list out of all of the chocolates that I've got here, and that would be a wonderful way to go and present the results of this individually, right? So, so the other thing we've got is, we have guidelines on how to offer feedback. So the kind of feedback that we're looking for. And then this year, thanks to Cocoa Supply, who's been a collaborator and sponsor of the Chocolate Life in the past, this year, Cocoa Supply is sponsoring this Innovation Award. And the Innovation Award is something that Dustin and I talked about at great length over the course of the last year, which is, sometimes you'll get into a category and there will be an entry and you go, wow, this is a really unusual entry for one reason or another. But it doesn't quite hit the mark and be deserving of a 5 rating, right? So in reality, among the 9 or so judges which are going to be part of this, in order to win a gold in any category, most of the judges are going to give it, a 4 or 5. That's just the way it goes, right? And sometimes there are entries that are just really, really interesting ideas, right? And you go, ooh, I want to encourage, more work in this idea. Often it's a set of flavors or textures which I'm not familiar with, but I think represent an interesting idea. And you can't give, in this judging system, there's no points for innovation, right? That would affect the score, right? The final judging score. And so what we're doing this year is separating out innovation, right, as a separate category. It's not part of the tasting score, so it's going to be a separate awards. So we have dark, milk, white, inclusions, and innovations as another award, which we think is cool. I'm looking forward to seeing if there are any bars that win an innovation award which didn't win either gold or silver or bronze in any of their categories. It's going to be really, really interesting to see. But for me, there's always been this tension because I'll be sitting in a competition and there'll be something that I run across. So, for example, this happened specifically at the Good Food Awards for me, and I think this is the genesis, right? So I'm sitting and we're in the final flight of judging for the morning round, which is how we did it then. I have no idea how they do it now. And I have still yet another salted butter caramel. We probably had like 5 entries that we were dealing with at our table. And then somebody had done something with a very unusually flavored marzipan, right? This is a confectionery competition, not a chocolate competition. So we're judging sort of the gestalt, the overall sense of the confection. So we're thinking about, and I'm going, this is a flavor we don't often see in marzipan, right? And so, we're looking for the last recommendation. So the table is one more recommendation we want to put in for the morning flight that we're doing, because it was the first 2 were really, really obvious, right, that we wanted to recommend to move forward to the later judging round. But we couldn't make a decision about that, right? And so we had one really, really interesting discussion about, okay, this is still yet another very competent, very, very tasty salted butter caramel, right? But here is somebody who's taken a risk and done something unusual with a confectionery center, marzipan, right? Which is not all that usual, right? Certainly within the context of this competition. And, it's American-made almonds, American-grown almonds. And so the marzipan was made locally. So just a really, really fabulous piece. And I would have had, trouble picking which one I would prefer to eat in any particular time. But I said, what we want to do is we want to reward the risk. We want to reward the unusual flavor profile that was given, that the maker put in and did it. And so bang. And so we ended up recommending that this marzipan piece go through, although the rest of the judging panel didn't think the same way as we did. So it didn't make it through to the end, if I recall correctly. But that experience is one which influenced the conversation that Dustin and I were having, and then going out and looking for a sponsor for this Innovation Award. So there will be, I believe, 3 Innovation Awards. They're not ordered, so there's not going to be a gold innovation, a silver innovation, or bronze innovation. There's going to be up to 3 awards that are going to be given for innovation, and it's each of the judges. We don't have the form that the judge will be doing, but every single judge is going to be asked to make a recommendation for innovation for up to 2 different entries in each category. So I can recommend 2 innovation awards in dark, 2 innovation for milk, 2 innovation for white, and 2 innovation for inclusions. And then I'm asked to rank order them. Of the 2, this is my first choice and this is my second choice. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that rank ordering system to figure out which entries are going to be given the innovation awards. So I'm really looking forward to thinking about that. I'm going to have an opportunity to think about innovation during the judging, but I'm not required to think, to write down anything about anything about innovation on the feedback form. If I want to, this additional comments feedback, I could say, listen, I'm considering this for an innovation award, but blah, 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 blah. I could go and think about it that way, right? But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till I get through all of the bars in the competition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my recommendations after the fact, right? After I get through all of them. Certainly it's going to be a consideration, but I'm not going to be making my decisions in the middle of the judging, partway through. I've only tasted, half of the entries. I'm not thinking about innovation in that way. I'm doing it. I'm going to be waiting until the end to go about making that recommendation. And that's the judging process. So for me here, task number one, what I have to do as a judge working virtually is I make sure that I have everything that I'm supposed to have, right? Makes sense, but it's not always the case. I might wait until I start judging and go, I don't have everything, or I have one more than I'm supposed to have, and what is it's not obvious from the label how these two things go together, right? Which was the case with one of the entries that I had. And so I go through and I make sure that I have everything that I have. And there's some other questions about labeling this year, about who is what and all this other kind of stuff. So I was able to correspond with Dustin to make sure that I really understood what was going on. And really important to have that clarity before I begin. Now, task number 2 for me in terms of doing this is the next thing I'm going to do, right? The chocolate arrived on Wednesday. And so today's Friday, 2 days later. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down and take out all the bars, right? And then I am going to organize them into flights of 9 bars, I think, right? So over the course of 7 days, I'm going to try to get to 8 days, 6 bars, 8 days, 7 bars. I'll figure it out. I mean, but I'm going to think about that. And then I'm going to think about how many different bars from each category I want to taste in every given day. So I'm not going to do all of the dark chocolate bars in one day and all of the milk chocolate bars in one day. It's just way too much for me. So given the opportunity, it's way too much for me just because of how we're being asked to judge, right? So it doesn't fit. Also, I have other things that I need to do, and trying to judge 25 bars in one day or 20 bars in one day is like not going to be possible given my schedule. And you get tired of eating, right? And your taste buds flag, and so there are lots of reasons not to try to push this too far. So the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to organize things in ways that make sense, and I'll probably do that this afternoon once I get off this episode. From then, I'm going to go and they're going to be organized into day 1 and day 2 and day 3. So that makes sense. And then it's just the discipline of going through and each day and getting through what it is that I'm supposed to get through the day. And I will break it up, right? I will do some in the morning, I will do some in the afternoon, and I will do some in the evening. It's going to affect what I choose to eat over the course of the next couple of weeks. Nothing really spicy. I'm not going to be drinking much alcohol over the course of the next week. Moderate my coffee consumption, green tea, right, rather than coffee over the course of the next week, and so that I can get through all of the things that I need to do. Now, of all the competitions that I've judged over the course of the last couple of years, I think the competition that is closest in spirit to the Craft Chocolate Challenge is the Prêmio Bean-to-Bar Brasil, which is organized by Zelia Francione. So again, there are limited number of categories, right? There is a limit to the number of entries in every category that any particular company can send into the competition. And then there is a limit to the number of awards. And the number of awards given in any category is based on a percentage of the number of awards in that category. So the more awards there are in a category, or the more entrants there are in a category, the more potential awards there are going to be. But there is a limit. But so it might be 3%, it might be 8%, whatever the number is. But there's going to be a limit, and there's also limits on the maximum number of gold, silver, bronze. So it is very, very carefully considered, so you don't have what we call awards inflation. So Right. So it's theoretically possible, it's theoretically possible in a category, if all the judges really, really like products, that every product entered into a category will win some sort of award, whether gold or silver or bronze, right? And so it's really nice to be able to say, not everybody that enters is going to win something. Prize inflation is a real challenge. It's really, really good for the awards, right? It may be good for the makers, but if there are 200 winners in a competition, and we don't know how many entrants there are, it becomes a challenge to know why these as opposed to others, especially if the feedback is not shared generally. So I am really, really, the approach taken by the Craft Chocolate Challenge and the Prêmio Bean-to-Bar Brasil is one in terms of limiting the number of awards, limiting the number of entrants, I think is also really, really good. We are given, so in the Premio, judging the packaging is not a part of any of the feedback which is given. So every single entrance is required to submit their chocolate in the same mold. So little 5-gram squares. It's the same mold. And so with so I mean, I have the package. I mean, somebody comes to me, I have, let's just pull a package at random. Okay, just happen to pull yours, Mike. So I know who made this chocolate. So I am not judging any of these chocolates blind. That's not a part of the way this competition works. But other competitions are supposed to be blind for the most part. However, if you allow the entrants to enter bars, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to break up the bars. Then sometimes the name of the company is in the mold, or there are some molds which are, unique in terms of their design. And if you're at all, experienced, you know who the maker is, even if it's supposed to be blind, and that can influence you subtly. In this particular case, I know who every single maker is. What I need to do is I need to go and say, okay, yeah, I've met Mike King of Encore Coffee personally, right? And been to his roastery and chocolate factory in Kansas City, right? And I need to step back from that and forget everything that is that I know about Mike and judge what it is that he's given me on that way, right? Well, I don't know if I've ever met Mark in person, but we spent a lot of time. Mark at Blue Spruce is one of the regular participants in my monthly all members AMA call. And so Mark and I have spent a lot of time seeing each other over video. I had a chance to meet Chef Gardner, who is Marsata did not enter the competition, but I met him in person when I was in LA in December. So, it turns out, when you know who is behind everything, right? It's easier. I find it easier to be able to step back and judge the bar, judge the entry, without bringing into it the other things that I know about this. For me, right? It's very, very different from I look at a bar and I go, oh, out of the 9 bars on this plate, I recognize 3 of them, right? And it turns out that there's something about that identifying something which is supposed to be de-identified, which does have an influence. I found for me, it's just harder to do, right? Others may not have the same challenge, but for me, it's harder to do. Right? And so with the Prêmio Bean-to-Bar Brasil, what Zelia does is that, if there's a dark category and a milk category, each entry is given a number, right? And there's a different color foil, right? So dark chocolate might be silver, milk chocolate might be gold, right? And so it's easy to tell what we're doing. But again, there is no specific requirement to taste anything in any particular order, right? I just have a box. It has all the pieces in it. I might have 2 samples per entry, right? Again, 5 grams a piece, 7 grams a piece, not a huge amount of chocolate to go through. But I get to decide what I'm consuming in what order and when. And because they're completely de-identified, there's no opportunity for me to be able to identify it. Although it may be that there is a chocolate that is so distinct, and if I've had it before, that I would recognize it again. I personally don't rate chocolate that way, right? So I don't think about reviewing chocolate that way. I think it's the best way to hesitate it. So if you're learning to become a professional taster, so if I go to some sort of tasting program, right, or I want to become a sommelier in wine, what you're doing is you're tasting you're training your taste memory. If you've never tasted a Bordeaux before, you're not going to be able to recognize it as a Bordeaux, right? And so what you do is you spend time drinking lots and lots of Bordeaux's to be able to differentiate Bordeaux's from Burgundies from other things. So you pick them up, and then the hallmarks of specific makers and the hallmarks of specific vintages, right? These are things which are all about contact and familiarization and training your tasting memory, right? For me, that's not the way. I mean, I don't sit there tasting a chocolate and going, oh, these beans must be from Venezuela, or oh, this must be a Criollo as opposed to a Forastero. That's even if that were possible, and I don't think it is. For some people, it might be if they have very, very good memories, taste memories. Right? That's not the way I approach it, right? And so it becomes easier for it because my approach is different, which is about Gestalt impression, not necessarily being able to go identify something, right? Right, and describe. So it's a different approach, and I've talked about this in other episodes of the Chocolate Life Live and Pod Save Chocolate about how I go and think about the whole process of judging in detail. And if that's something that you think you'd like me to go over again, let me know in the comments, and I will do that. And I want to thank everybody. I mean, we've gone through. We're a couple minutes over. This hour has just flown by. I want to, before we head out, say thank you to everybody who's made it through to the end, made it through to this far, and to say that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored and supported by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, you can go there, you can click this green button on the top, or you can click in the circle on the bottom. I'm logged in. If you're not logged in, I'll say join. You can go and support the Chocolate Life. There's always a free membership. Right? If you have the resources to support this, I don't do Patreon. I don't do paid advertising. I'm not doing paid link placement, none of those things. That the support you give to the Chocolate Life is the way that you make it possible for me to continue to do these episodes and do everything that I do with the Chocolate Life. And then, of course, all the comments that people give. So Mark at Blue Spruce, thanks for the insights. Mark, I mean, again, you have an entry in the Sears competition, 2 entries, right? Mike at Encore has 2 entries. Let's get it up there. And so you'll have a better idea of how I approach, number one, about how I influence the judging rubric, right? And how the form has evolved and how the form will be used. You know that already, but there are many people who might not. But also, how I approach the judging and the challenge that is in front of me, and how judging at the Craft Chocolate Challenge is very, very different from judging at the International Chocolate Awards. I've never judged the Academy of Chocolate Awards, but I think the process is fairly similar. I have been a judge of the Good Food Awards. I was not a judge for the AVPA, the Agence Valorisation des Produits Agriculture. The reason why is I'm not French, and they limit judges to people who are, if not born in France, then are very, very proficient French speakers, which I am not. I have been the head judge at other competitions, so the Next Generation Chocolatier competition, which is more than a decade ago now. Every single one of these competitions presents a new and different approach to judging. And that's what's interesting to me. Not only the ability to taste all these different chocolates. I mean, I'm going to taste 67, 68, 69, something like that over the course of the next 10 days. Makers I've never heard of before, from places that, well, I don't think that there's any chocolate maker. I don't think there's any entrant that's coming from a country that I've never tasted before, either the beans or the country where the maker is located in, right? But Japan and India and Honduras. I mean, there's Denmark. There's a wide range of variety here, and part of my love for chocolate and part of what it is that I love about the work that I do is getting an opportunity to taste all this fabulous work from all these great makers from all over the place. I mean, it's really a pleasure. It's also a privilege to do this. I've been doing it now for close to for more than 20 years. With specifically around craft chocolate. You know, we start well. We start thinking about Scharfenberger in the late 1990s, but really the American craft chocolate movement kicked off in the mid 2000s. So 2004, 2005, 2006, in that time frame, and where it spread to the rest of the world. So I've been doing this for a while. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to follow along, to have an opportunity to follow the careers, the success, and the improvements, because I got to tell you, the work that is being done right now is consistently at a much higher level than what was going on 20 years ago. There are times when it was really a challenge to get through competition. Yeah, there was some pretty dicey entries when you get there. And when it comes to flavorings that are being added to chocolates and inclusions that are being added, there's a lot of creativity. And I just enjoy what it is that I'm doing. And I enjoy the opportunity that every single entrance gives me as a judge to learn more about the art and craft of making chocolate. And I hope you get the sense, right, that, after all this time, I'm still having fun. Because if you're working with chocolate and you are not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Ciao, everybody. Until the next time, have a great weekend. Oh, and remember, daylight savings time this weekend. So when we come back next week, it's still going to be 10 Mountain Standard Time for me in Arizona, because Arizona doesn't observe daylight savings time. So check to make sure how your own time zone changes with respect to this. But I'll be back on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time with the next episode of Pod Save Chocolate. Until then, everybody, again, have a great weekend and have fun.